the hell is she doing here? Ethan Calloway's grip tightened around the crystal champagne flute as his bride's hand slid possessively over his wrist. 1,000 guests filled the opulent ballroom of the Fairmont Grand in New York, their hushed conversations echoing off the gilded ceiling. But no one spoke now. No one moved. Because standing at the entrance, framed by the towering double doors like a ghost from a past he'd tried to erase, was Olivia Carter, his ex-wife. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to exist in this world anymore, and she definitely wasn't supposed to be pregnant. A slow murmur rippled through the crowd, a wave of whispered disbelief. Cameras from the press corner tilted slightly, their operators sensing an unplanned scandal about to unfold. Ethan barely heard any of it over the roaring in his ears. "Stay calm," Sienna whispered, her red-painted lips barely moving, her grip on his wrist tightened. "She's doing this for attention, ignore her." But Ethan couldn't ignore her, because Olivia wasn't just standing there, she was walking toward him. Each step measured, controlled, a quiet storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. And then she stopped, just 10 feet away. Ethan barely registered the champagne flute slipping from his fingers. The sharp shatter of glass against the marble floor was nothing compared to the sound of his carefully curated world cracking apart. His body felt like it was moving in slow motion as he took a step forward, drawn by something stronger than reason, stronger than fear. Because he knew. He knew this moment was coming. He just never thought it would happen here. Not in front of Sienna. Not in front of everyone. The band had stopped playing. Even the waitstaff, trained to be invisible, were frozen in place. Olivia let the silence stretch, let the tension coil tight enough to choke before she finally spoke. "Congratulations on your wedding, Ethan." Her voice was smooth, controlled, but there was a sharpness beneath it, something surgical, meant to cut. "I thought it was only fair that I bring a gift." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small sealed envelope. For one wild second, Ethan's heart stopped. A lawsuit? A DNA test? A final, cruel goodbye? His feet felt cemented to the floor. Sienna exhaled sharply, stepping forward. "Whatever drama you think you're stirring up, it's unnecessary," she said, her voice dripping with forced politeness. "Ethan has moved on. Maybe it's time you do the same." Olivia's gaze flicked to her, then back to Ethan. She extended the envelope, but not to him. She placed it on the gilded wedding gift table, deliberately, as if she were making a statement. Then she turned back to Ethan, and for the first time that night, something cracked in her expression. Just for a second, just long enough for him to see it. The hurt, the betrayal, and something else. Pity. She was pitying him. Olivia took a slow breath, steeling herself before saying, "I truly hope this marriage brings you the happiness ours couldn't." And with that, she turned and walked away. The doors slammed shut behind her. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sienna's nails dug into Ethan's arm, but he didn't even flinch. His entire body was still locked on that closed door, his mind racing through the one detail he couldn't ignore. She was pregnant. And if Olivia Carter was pregnant, then he had just married the wrong woman. You won't believe what's inside Olivia's letter. But here's a hint. It changes everything. Do you think Ethan deserves to know the truth? Comment below. Like and subscribe for part 2, where the real downfall begins. Ethan Calloway didn't drink at his own wedding. But tonight, he did. The burn of whiskey in his throat was nothing compared to the fire consuming his mind. Olivia's unexpected appearance had left him unsteady, but it wasn't just her presence, it was what she carried. His child. Now, as the echoes of his wedding vows still hung in the grand ballroom, he sat alone in a dimly lit study, a glass of bourbon sweating in his grip. The celebrations continued outside, a symphony of laughter, clinking glasses and hollow toasts to a future he no longer felt certain about. Sienna had noticed, of course. She always did. "Ethan." Her voice sliced through the heavy air. He glanced up to see her standing in the doorway, still in her designer gown, looking every bit the woman who had orchestrated this perfect night. The woman he had chosen. She closed the door behind her, stepping into the low glow of the room. "I don't like being ignored on my wedding day," he exhaled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "It's been a long night." Her lips pressed into a thin line, because of her. Ethan didn't answer. Sienna stalked closer, her heels silent on the Persian rug. If you need to say something, say it. He set the glass down carefully, measuring his words. She's pregnant? Sienna's expression didn't change. She had known. Of course she had. Doesn't change anything, she said smoothly, sitting on the armrest of his chair, draping a hand over his shoulder. She's your past. I'm your future. But Ethan felt neither in this moment. He only felt the weight of something unraveling. I didn't know, he admitted. His voice was quieter than he intended. Sienna tilted her head, studying him. Would it have stopped you? A sharp pause. Ethan didn't answer, because he wasn't sure. Sienna leaned in, her lips ghosting over his ear. You made the right choice. Her fingers traced his jaw before she stood up. Now act like it. She turned and left without another word. He let out a slow breath, rubbing his face, his mind spinning. Olivia had left him with a single envelope, one he still hadn't opened. It sat untouched on the desk, daring him to rip it open. A part of him didn't want to, because deep down, he knew that whatever was inside could change everything. But he was already standing before he realized it. He reached for the envelope, fingers hesitating only for a moment before he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and one sentence. You're not the father. The room tilted. The words blurred, sharp and sudden, cutting deeper than he thought possible. His stomach twisted violently as he reread the sentence, his pulse a chaotic drumbeat in his ears. No explanation, no details. Just 5 words that detonated everything he had been trying to process. Ethan forced himself to breathe, but the air felt thin. Olivia was pregnant. That much was real. But if the child wasn't his, then why had she come? The question burned hotter than the alcohol in his veins. Before he could think twice, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out of the study. The sounds of the party were distant noise as he moved through the gilded hallways, down the grand staircase, and straight to the valet. Mr. Calloway? The man scrambled as Ethan tossed him $100 bill. Your car? Now. Minutes later, he was speeding through the slick streets of Manhattan, the city lights blurring past him as he dialed the only number that mattered. It rang twice before she picked up. A soft inhale. Then I was expecting this call, Olivia said. Her voice was calm, too calm. Ethan clenched the steering wheel. Is it true? A long silence. Then finally, yes. His jaw locked. You show up to my wedding pregnant and you don't think I deserve the truth? I didn't owe you anything, she said simply. Ethan swallowed the sharp reply on his tongue. She was right. She didn't owe him anything. Not after what he had done. His grip tightened. Then why did you come? This time, her silence felt different, like she was deciding how much to tell him. Then, softly, because I wanted you to see. See what? Another pause. Then, the life you threw away. The call ended. The line went dead. Ethan's hands trembled against the wheel, but it wasn't from anger. It wasn't even from regret. It was from something worse. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if he had been played, or if he had just lost the only real thing he ever had. What is Olivia hiding? Is she telling the truth? Or is this just the beginning of Ethan's worst nightmare? What do you think Olivia's real motive is? Drop your predictions below. Ethan Calloway didn't sleep that night. He spent hours pacing the floor of his penthouse, staring at the city skyline, replaying Olivia's words over and over in his head. You're not the father. It didn't make sense. None of it did. The way she had shown up at his wedding, pregnant, standing there like a ghost from the past. If the child wasn't his, why had she come? Why had she let him think, even for a second, that everything he believed about their past was about to change? His temples throbbed as he downed another glass of whiskey, but it did nothing to silence the thoughts clawing at him. Olivia had always been calm, steady. She never acted out of impulse. Every move she made was intentional. So what the hell was her game? The clock read 4:12 a.m. when his phone lit up with a notification. A message. From her. Olivia Carter, meet me at the gallery on West 57th. No security, no cameras, just us. A weight settled in Ethan's chest. He could feel the shift, the way the ground beneath him had started to crack. This wasn't over. 15 minutes later, Ethan pulled up outside the gallery, a sleek glass structure nestled between high-end boutiques. It was closed at this hour, but Olivia was already waiting by the entrance, wrapped in a long black coat, her hair pulled into a loose knot. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city buzzed around them, but here, in this quiet pocket of the night, it was just the two of them. She looked the same, and yet, not the same at all. Ethan exhaled sharply. You really know how to pick your moments. A flicker of something crossed Olivia's face. You came. I want answers. His voice was low, controlled, but his hands clenched at his sides. You show up at my wedding. You let me think. I didn't let you think anything, she cut in, her tone unreadable. You assumed. His jaw locked. You could have just told me. A phone call, a text, hell, even a letter. But no, you had to walk in there, in front of everyone. I needed you to see me. Those 5 words hit harder than they should have. She turned, unlocking the gallery door and stepping inside. After a hesitation, Ethan followed. The space was dimly lit, the scent of fresh paint lingering in the air. Art pieces lined the walls, abstract colors, fragmented brushstrokes that somehow made sense together. I own this place now, Olivia said softly. It was always my dream, remember? He did. Years ago, when their life had still made sense, she had talked about it. The dream of curating a space like this, of surrounding herself with something real. And now she had it. His throat tightened. Olivia, do you want to know why I came? She asked, cutting him off. Ethan didn't move. Yeah. She turned to face him fully, her eyes sharper now, testing him. Because I needed to see what kind of man you are now, she said. Because I needed to know if there was anything left of the person I once trusted. His chest constricted. And, she exhaled, her expression unreadable. I got my answer. Silence pressed between them. Ethan's hands curled into fists. You didn't just come for closure. No, Olivia admitted. I came to warn you. The air shifted. A cold prickle ran down his spine. Warn me about what? She hesitated, and for the first time, something like hesitation flickered in her gaze. Then, finally, Sienna. His entire body went rigid. What about her? Olivia looked at him like she already knew he wasn't ready for the truth. But she said it anyway. She's been planning this from the beginning. Ethan laughed, a dry, humorless sound. What the hell are you talking about? She played you, Olivia said simply. You think she loves you? You think she married you for you? No, Ethan. She married you for what she's about to take. His pulse thundered. That's bullshit, is it? Olivia arched a brow. Then why is her name on 3 of your offshore accounts? The room tilted. A chill ran through his veins. That's not possible. Check for yourself, Olivia said, crossing her arms. The money, the stock transfers, the assets you thought you controlled. Sienna's been moving the pieces since the beginning. You didn't just marry the wrong woman, Ethan. You handed her the knife she's about to put in your back. Ethan felt physically ill. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But Olivia wasn't done. She never loved you. You were just the final step. And now that she has your name, your money, your power, she won't need you anymore. His heart pounded. You're lying. Olivia's expression didn't change. Then why is she on a flight to Geneva right now? The floor dropped beneath him. His body went still, but his mind was already moving. Too fast, too slow, too much all at once. His phone buzzed. He yanked it out. Bank alert. Large transfer request pending approval. His breath came short. He opened the notification, a 7-figure transaction. Destination, Sienna Blake. His blood turned to ice. And suddenly, Ethan Calloway, who had built an empire from nothing, who had spent his entire life believing he was untouchable, realized he had just lost everything. Don't miss part 4. Betrayal, deception, and a race against time. Will Ethan stop Sienna before it's too late? Or is this only the beginning of his downfall? Did Olivia warn him out of revenge, or is there something else at play? Comment your theories below. Ethan Calloway had always been a man in control, until now. His fingers hovered over the approve button on his phone screen. A 7-figure transaction. A transfer to Sienna Blake, his wife. The woman who, until 10 minutes ago, he thought he could trust. His stomach twisted as Olivia's voice echoed in his head. She never loved you. You handed her the knife she's about to put in your back. For the first time in his life, Ethan didn't know what move to make. If Olivia was right, then Sienna had been planning this for months. Maybe years. If Olivia was lying, then... But no. The proof was in his hands. Sienna had played him. His pulse slammed as he hit decline. Transaction blocked. A second later, his phone rang. The name on the screen made his blood go cold. Sienna. He exhaled sharply before answering, keeping his voice calm. Hell. For a moment, there was silence on the other end. Then her voice, soft, controlled. You declined the transfer. It wasn't a question. Ethan forced a slow breath. It was flagged as suspicious. You know how the banks are. Another pause. Then, are you at the penthouse? His gut clenched. I am, he lied. Good, she said smoothly. I'll be home soon. We should talk. The call ended. A muscle in Ethan's jaw twitched as he lowered the phone. The way she had said it, we should talk. Not a question, not a concern, a statement. She knew. He turned back to Olivia, who was watching him carefully. She's coming back. Olivia crossed her arms. Then you have two options. Wait for her and pretend you don't know anything, or get ahead of her. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his keys and strode for the exit. 15 minutes later, he stepped into the private office of Weston Grant, his longtime attorney. The older man barely looked up from his paperwork. Ethan, strange hour for a visit. Ethan tossed his phone onto the desk, the blocked transaction still on the screen. I need to lock down every account in my name. Now, Weston's brow lifted. I assume this has something to do with your wife? Ethan clenched his jaw. She's stealing from me. Weston sighed, removing his glasses. Ethan, you signed a shared asset agreement when you got married. If she initiated those transfers, you must have authorized them at some point. Ethan felt his stomach drop. That's not possible, he said. Weston gave him a pointed look. Are you sure? Sienna's no idiot. If she's taking money, she's doing it legally. Ethan's chest tightened. Then find a loophole. Weston exhaled. I'll freeze what I can, but Ethan? If she's smart, she already has access to more than you realize. The words landed like a gut punch. Ethan rubbed his temples. Then tell me how to stop her. Weston hesitated. Does she know you're onto her? A long silence. Then, she does now. Weston muttered a curse under his breath. Then, my friend, you'd better move fast. Ethan's grip on the armrest tightened. What are my options? Weston leaned back. You want the legal answer or the practical one? Ethan's jaw locked. Both. Weston sighed. Legally, you confront her. You make it clear that you know what she's doing and negotiate a way out before this gets uglier. Ethan's stomach turned. That wouldn't work. Sienna had already made her move. What's the practical answer? Weston's expression darkened. You play dirtier than she does. The word sent a cold chill through him. He wasn't sure which option felt worse. His phone buzzed. Sienna. Again, Ethan exhaled. I'll handle it. Weston didn't look convinced. Don't be reckless, Ethan. If Sienna set you up, she's already 2 steps ahead. Ethan didn't answer. He grabbed his phone and walked out. By the time he reached the penthouse, Sienna was waiting. She was perched on the couch, a glass of wine in one hand, watching him like a predator who had already cornered her prey. You lied to me. Ethan shut the door behind him. Did I? Her red lips curled. You said you were here. You weren't. His chest tightened. So where were you? She asked, tilting her head. A test? Ethan forced a smirk and sat down across from her, stretching an arm along the back of the couch. What's with the interrogation? Sienna's smile didn't waver. Because something changed tonight. She set her glass down. Did you talk to Olivia? The air turned razor sharp. Ethan's pulse pounded, but he didn't let it show. Why would I? Sienna studied him. Then, almost casually, she said, because she thinks she's won. A slow, ice-cold dread slid through him. Ethan masked his reaction with a low chuckle. And what exactly did she win? Sienna smiled. That's the wrong question, darling. She leaned forward. The question you should be asking is, why is she helping you? Ethan went still. Sienna's nails tapped against her wine glass. You think she's some kind of savior, don't you? Warning you, protecting you. His jaw clenched. Sienna's smile widened. Ethan, she's not trying to save you. Silence. Then softly, she's trying to destroy you first. Ethan's blood turned to ice. And just like that, everything he thought he knew shifted again. Olivia warned Ethan about Sienna. But was it all a setup? Has he been playing into her hands this whole time? Who do you think is truly pulling the strings? Drop your theories below. Ethan Calloway had seen deception before. He had built an empire by predicting the moves of ruthless businessmen, reading between the lines of false smiles and firm handshakes. But this was something else. He sat frozen on the couch, staring at Sienna, trying to process her words. Olivia isn't trying to save you. She's trying to destroy you first. The air felt thick, suffocating. His pulse pounded in his ears, but he forced himself to keep his expression neutral. You're lying, he said, his voice dangerously calm. Sienna smirked, swirling the wine in her glass. Am I? He wanted to believe she was bluffing, that this was just another mind game, a desperate attempt to shift blame before her entire scheme unraveled. But there was something in her eyes, something disturbingly confident. Sienna wasn't panicking. She wasn't even nervous. And that meant one of two things. Either she had already won, or she knew something he didn't. His grip tightened on the armrest. If Olivia wanted to destroy me, why the hell would she warn me about you? Sienna let out a soft laugh. Because she doesn't need to take your money, Ethan. She's after something bigger. His stomach twisted. And what's that? Sienna leaned in, her voice a whisper of amusement. She wants to ruin you where it really hurts. The words cut deep, sharper than he expected. He forced himself to shake his head. You don't know what you're talking about. Sienna arched a brow. Oh, don't I? Tell me, Ethan, have you even asked yourself why Olivia suddenly came back? Why she waited until your wedding day to make her grand entrance? His jaw clenched. Because she wanted me to know the truth. Sienna's smirk widened. No, darling, she wanted an audience. The thought struck him harder than he wanted to admit. Could that be true? Had Olivia planned all of it? The timing, the letter, the pregnancy. It had felt deliberate, yes, but was it really calculated? Was she setting him up from the start? Ethan felt a sharp pull in his chest, a dangerous mix of anger and doubt. His phone vibrated in his pocket. For a split second he hesitated. Then slowly he pulled it out. Olivia Carter, one new message. A warning? A confession? He exhaled, unlocked the screen, and read. You need to get out. Now. A chill ran down his spine. Sienna leaned back, eyes flickering toward the phone. Oh, what now? She mused, sipping her wine. Ethan stood abruptly. I have to go. Sienna let out a soft laugh. Running to her already? His fists clenched. I don't trust either of you. Her smile didn't falter. That's the first smart thing you've said all night. Ethan turned and walked out, his pulse racing. Something was happening. And if he didn't move fast, he'd be the last to figure out what. It took Ethan 7 minutes to reach Olivia's gallery. The moment he stepped inside, he knew something was wrong. The lights were dim, the door was unlocked, and Olivia was pacing near the window, phone in hand. She turned sharply when she saw him. Ethan, we have a problem. His chest was still tight from the conversation with Sienna. Yeah, we do. Olivia shook her head. Not that. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Sienna just moved everything. His breath stalled. What? Olivia exhaled sharply. She transferred the assets, the ones Weston froze? Gone. Different accounts, different names. A rush of adrenaline shot through him. How the hell? She knew you were going to stop her. Olivia's voice was steady, but there was an urgency in her eyes. She was always ahead of you. Ethan swallowed, running a hand through his hair. His entire empire. His money. His leverage. Gone. His pulse roared. Then why did she stay? Olivia hesitated. Because she's not done. Ethan's blood ran cold. Olivia held his gaze. Sienna doesn't just want to leave. She wants to burn everything down on her way out. The weight of her words settled in his chest like cement. He had underestimated Sienna. He had underestimated both of them. A slow breath escaped him. So tell me, Olivia. His voice was low, measured. Are you here to stop her? She didn't answer right away. For the first time, she looked almost hesitant. Ethan's stomach turned, and suddenly, for the first time since this all started, he wasn't sure who was the bigger threat anymore. Sienna has everything, Ethan has nothing. And Olivia, she's holding secrets of her own. Is Olivia really on Ethan's side, or is this all part of something even bigger? Comment your thoughts below. Ethan Calloway was out of time. Sienna had won, his assets gone, his leverage gone. And yet she hadn't left. Which meant she wasn't done with him. Across the dimly lit gallery, Olivia watched him carefully. The glow from the city lights cast sharp shadows across her face, making it impossible to read her expression. She knew something. Ethan exhaled sharply, the weight of everything pressing against his ribs. Tell me the truth, he said, his voice quieter than he intended. Are you helping me or setting me up? Olivia blinked once. If I wanted to take you down, Ethan? She stepped closer. You'd already be on your knees. His jaw clenched. That wasn't the answer he wanted. His phone buzzed in his hand. Sienna. His pulse jumped. He let it ring twice before answering. Where are you? A soft laugh, mocking, amused. Oh, Ethan, I thought you were smarter than that. He gritted his teeth. You stole from me. Did I? She mused. Because last I checked, everything I took was legally mine. His grip on the phone tightened. You don't get to walk away from this. Sienna hummed. That's adorable. You still think you have control. His mind raced. She was too calm, too collected. That meant she had one final move left. Sienna, he said carefully, where are you? There was a pause. Then, in a voice almost too soft to hear, I'm exactly where I need to be. The line went dead. Cold dread crawled up his spine. Something was wrong. Olivia was already moving. We need to go. Now. Ethan didn't hesitate. He followed her out of the gallery, the tension between them thick and suffocating. Outside, the city felt too quiet. Ethan's mind raced as they slid into Olivia's car. Tell me what's going on, he demanded. She gripped the wheel, jaw tight. You don't get it, do you? Sienna doesn't just want your money, she wants to erase you. His blood ran cold. Erase him, not just ruin, not just humiliate, destroy. The tires screeched as Olivia pulled onto the highway. She's already moved the money, Ethan, but if you think that was her endgame, you never really knew who you married. He ran a hand down his face. Then tell me. Olivia glanced at him, her grip on the wheel white-knuckled. Sienna doesn't just take, she replaces. A sharp breath left his lips. What the hell does that mean? Olivia pressed harder on the gas. It means, right now, while you're sitting here, she's not running. She's finishing what she started. Finishing what she started. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Then his phone buzzed again. A notification. Ethan glanced down. His vision blurred as he read the words. Breaking news. Billionaire Ethan Calloway under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. His stomach dropped. He clicked the link, barely breathing as he scanned the article. Federal authorities are reportedly investigating Calloway Industries for fraudulent financial activity, including offshore accounts linked to money laundering schemes. Sources claim insider documents expose an elaborate network implicating Ethan Calloway himself. His head snapped up. She framed me. Olivia didn't flinch. Of course she did. The reality hit like a freight train. This wasn't just about taking everything. This was about replacing him with the villain. Ethan gritted his teeth. Tell me we can stop this. Olivia's hands tightened around the wheel. There's only one way. He exhaled sharply. And that is? She hesitated. Then, slowly, too carefully, she said, You let me handle it. Ethan's pulse roared. No. Something about the way she said it was wrong. His breath came slow and controlled. And why would I trust you? Her fingers drummed against the wheel. Then she turned to him, eyes steady. Because I was the one who gave her the information to frame you. The words hit like a gunshot. Ethan's entire body went still. What? Olivia swallowed. I didn't know what she was planning. His fists clenched. The hell you didn't? She exhaled. I wanted to hurt you, Ethan. I won't lie about that, but I never wanted it to go this far. His hands itched to grab the wheel, to stop the car, to demand answers. She had betrayed him. She had set him up. And now she was offering to save him. Ethan's voice was quiet, deadly. Why should I believe a single word you say? She didn't blink. Because you don't have a choice. The city blurred past them, but all Ethan could see was his own downfall. Everything was gone. His money, his name, his power, and the only person who could help him was the one who helped destroy him in the first place. Ethan's only way out is through Olivia. But can he trust her? Or is this just another step in his complete downfall? Did Olivia really switch sides, or is she still playing him? Comment your thoughts below. Ethan Calloway had always known betrayal. But this was something else entirely. The city lights blurred outside the car window, but all he could see was his own destruction unfolding in real time. Fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. His name was already being dragged through the mud, his legacy burning before his eyes. And the worst part? Olivia had helped make it happen. She was driving, one hand gripping the wheel, the other drumming against the leather interior. Ethan exhaled slowly, controlling the storm raging in his chest. Tell me why I shouldn't throw you out of this car right now. Olivia didn't flinch. Because you need me. His laugh was cold. I needed you 6 months ago. Before you handed my life to Sienna on a silver platter. She kept her eyes on the road. I didn't know she'd go this far. Bullshit. His jaw clenched. You don't accidentally ruin someone like this. A muscle ticked in her cheek. I wanted revenge, Ethan, but I didn't want this. He studied her, searching for the lie. There had to be one. Because if Olivia had been playing him all this time, why the hell would she help now? His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Right now, there was only one question that mattered. Tell me exactly what you did. His voice was low, razor sharp. Every single detail. Olivia inhaled, gripping the wheel tighter. It started with the offshore accounts. I fed Sienna information, old deals, hidden transactions. At first I thought she just wanted leverage over you, something to use in the divorce. Ethan stayed silent. I didn't know she was setting you up for federal charges, he scoffed. So what? You were fine with her blackmailing me, but not destroying me? Her knuckles went white. I didn't think she could pull it off. Ethan let out a slow breath, eyes burning. Then you're either an idiot or a liar. Olivia's grip on the wheel tightened. I didn't think she'd frame you for something she did herself. Silence. Ethan stilled. His heart pounded. What? Olivia finally looked at him. That's why I called you tonight. It's not just about clearing your name. It's about proving Sienna's the real criminal. The words hit like a gunshot. His entire body went rigid. The fraud, the offshore accounts, the money laundering, they weren't his. They were hers. The realization sent a slow, cold rage through his veins. Sienna used my name, he murmured. Olivia nodded. And now she's going to let you take the fall. Ethan clenched his fists. Tell me you have proof. Olivia hesitated. He felt it before she even spoke. It's not that simple, she said carefully. Ethan laughed. A sharp, hollow sound. Of course it isn't. There are files, she continued. Transactions that trace back to her. But she's good, Ethan. She covered her tracks. If we go to the feds now, all they'll see is your name. His mind raced. He needed leverage. Something that would turn the tables before Sienna locked him out of his own life forever. Where are the files? He asked. Olivia exhaled. That's the problem. She didn't need to say it. He already knew. Sienna had them. Ethan stared ahead, jaw tight. He had played this game for years, outmaneuvering enemies, turning threats into opportunities. But this time, the enemy was the woman he had married, and he had never seen her coming. His phone buzzed again, unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A man's voice, cold, calculated. Mr. Calloway. Ethan's pulse jumped. Who is this? You should come home, the voice said. Every muscle in his body locked. Home. The penthouse. Sienna. The call dropped. A slow, terrifying realization settled in his chest. This isn't just about money, Olivia said quietly. Ethan met her gaze. It's not. Sienna wasn't running, she was waiting, and whatever came next, he wasn't sure he'd survive it. Ethan finally knows the truth. But is it already too late to stop Sienna? Does Olivia really want to fix this, or is she still hiding something? Comment your thoughts below. Ethan Calloway was walking into a trap. He knew it, and yet he was still going. The city blurred past as Olivia drove, her grip on the wheel tight. The only sound was the low hum of the engine and Ethan's pulse pounding in his ears. Sienna was waiting. She had taken his money, his power, his name. And now she was waiting for him to come home. The penthouse loomed ahead, glass and steel reflecting the midnight skyline. Ethan exhaled slowly, shoving every ounce of uncertainty deep inside. Stay in the car, he said. Olivia didn't look at him. That's not happening. His jaw clenched. I don't need backup. She finally turned, eyes sharp. You need someone who isn't blinded by her. The words cut deeper than he wanted to admit. Sienna had fooled him once. He couldn't afford to let it happen again. A valet opened the car door as they pulled up. Ethan stepped out, his heartbeat steady, controlled. Olivia followed, heels clicking against the pavement. The lobby was empty. Too empty. The usual security, gone. A single elevator door was open, waiting. Ethan exchanged a look with Olivia before stepping inside. The ride up was silent. Then, a soft chime. The doors slid open. The penthouse was dimly lit, bathed in the glow of the city beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The air smelled like expensive wine and fresh-cut roses. And there, in the center of it all, perched on the edge of the leather sofa like a queen on her throne, Sienna. She looked effortless, a silk robe draped over her toned frame, a glass of red wine swirling in one hand, the picture of control. Welcome home, darling, she murmured. Ethan stepped inside, his body coiled like a loaded gun. Olivia stayed by the elevator, eyes scanning the room. Sienna smirked. No kiss, hello? His fists curled. Cut the bullshit. She sighed, taking a slow sip of wine. You always ruin the fun. Ethan took a step forward. Where are the files? Sienna tilted her head. Straight to business? No questions about why I did it? No dramatic monologue about betrayal? He exhaled sharply. I don't need to hear why. I already know. Her lips curled. Do you? His patience snapped. You framed me, Sienna. You moved your crimes under my name. You stole my empire, turned me into a criminal, and you let me. The words landed like a blade to the throat. Ethan stilled. Sienna leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Let's not pretend you weren't too blinded by me to see what was happening. You gave me access. You let me into every account, every deal, every part of your world. Her smirk widened. That's what makes this so delicious. Ethan's pulse pounded. She wasn't lying. She wasn't wrong. His biggest mistake wasn't trusting her. It was underestimating her. He forced his voice steady. Give me the files. Sienna sighed, setting her wine down. Why would I do that? Ethan stepped closer. Because if you don't, I'll make sure you go down with me. Silence. Then Sienna laughed, soft at first, then louder, sharper. It was the sound of pure amusement. Oh, Ethan, she purred. You still think you have power here? A cold prickle ran down his spine. Then, a voice behind him. Low, amused, dangerous. He really doesn't. Ethan turned sharply. And froze. A man stepped forward from the shadows, dressed in a crisp suit, his presence radiating quiet authority. Ethan knew that face. A face from backroom deals and whispered threats. Lorenzo De Luca, a name that didn't belong in boardrooms, a name that belonged to the underworld. Ethan's stomach dropped. Sienna leaned back, smirking. Surprise. Olivia moved closer. What the hell is this? Lorenzo smiled. Just a business arrangement. His gaze flicked to Ethan. And you, my friend, are in the way. Ethan's fists clenched. What did she promise you? Lorenzo's smirk widened. Everything. Sienna rose gracefully, crossing the room until she was beside Lorenzo. See, darling, I never needed your money. She glanced at Olivia, then back at Ethan. I needed your name. The realization hit like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just about taking his wealth. Sienna had been building her own empire, using his reputation to buy her way into power. And now? Now she was finished with him. His pulse roared, mind racing for a way out. A weakness, a leverage, anything. Olivia took a slow step forward. If you think you're walking away from this clean, Lorenzo cut her off with a smirk. Oh, sweetheart, we already have. Sienna sighed dramatically. But don't worry, Ethan, we're not complete monsters. She turned to Lorenzo. Make it quick. The order was casual, like he was nothing. Lorenzo nodded, a flick of his wrist. A gun, pointed at Ethan's head. The world slowed. Olivia moved first. A blur of motion, then gunfire. Ethan lunged. Fists. A struggle. Pain. The scent of gunpowder. The weight of impact. Then a body hitting the ground, and the world went still. Ethan walked into a trap. But did he make it out alive? Who got shot? Who's still standing? Drop your theories below. The gunshot ripped through the air. Ethan Calloway barely had time to react. The scent of gunpowder burned his lungs as the world exploded into chaos. Lorenzo's gun was still smoking, his eyes sharp, predatory. Ethan braced for pain, but it never came. A gasp, a body hitting the floor. His pulse pounded as his gaze snapped to the ground. Sienna. Blood bloomed across her silk robe, deep red seeping through the delicate fabric. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps, shock flickering in her eyes as she clutched her side. Olivia stood frozen, hands trembling, eyes locked on Sienna like she couldn't believe what just happened. And Lorenzo? Lorenzo just sighed, like this was nothing more than an inconvenience. Ethan barely had a second to process before Lorenzo turned the gun on him. Wasn't supposed to be her, Lorenzo muttered, tilting his head. Shame. Ethan's muscles coiled, every instinct screamed to move. But then, Sienna laughed, soft, weak. But there. Should have seen that coming, she rasped, her lips curling. Lorenzo rolled his eyes. You always did talk too much. Ethan's mind raced. Sienna was bleeding out. Lorenzo wasn't here to negotiate. This wasn't a warning. This was a cleanup. A slow, sinking realization settled in Ethan's chest. Sienna thought she was in control, but Lorenzo had never needed her. She had been useful. And now, she wasn't. Ethan took a careful step forward. If you kill me, you lose everything, Lorenzo chuckled. That so? You needed my name, Ethan said, voice steady despite the fire in his veins. Without me, the assets are frozen. The connections are gone. Lorenzo's expression didn't change. That sounds like a problem for you. Not me. Sienna let out a weak, breathless laugh. You underestimated him. Lorenzo's jaw ticked. Sienna smirked, blood staining her teeth. He's already got a plan. Ethan had no plan. Not yet. But Sienna's words had bought him seconds, and that was all he needed. A flicker of movement. Olivia. She saw it too. Ethan lunged at the same time Olivia moved. The shot went off, too close. A sharp burn seared across his arm, but he didn't stop. His fist connected with Lorenzo's wrist, knocking the gun aside as Olivia grabbed the vase from the table. Crash. Lorenzo stumbled, glass and ceramic shattering around him. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed Sienna's arm, yanking her up. She let out a strangled cry, but she moved. They ran. Through the hall, past the elevator. Ethan's vision blurred, but he didn't stop. He shoved open the stairwell door, the three of them stumbling down flight after flight, Sienna half dragging against him. Blood smeared across his sleeve. He couldn't tell if it was hers or his. Behind them, Lorenzo's voice echoed. Calm, too calm. You can't run forever, Calloway. They hit the parking garage. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. No time. A black SUV sat near the exit, engine running, a driver, waiting. Ethan didn't think. He shoved Sienna into the back seat, Olivia diving in after. Then, he turned. Lorenzo emerged from the stairwell, adjusting his cuffs like this was just another night. Ethan met his gaze. Stay the hell away from me. Lorenzo smiled. This isn't over. Ethan didn't answer. He slammed the door shut. Tires, screeching, city lights blurring. Ethan finally let out a breath. Blood dripped down his arm. Sienna was pale, struggling to stay conscious. Olivia was already pressing her hands over the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Ethan turned to the driver. Hospital. Now. But the driver didn't move. A slow, sinking feeling curled in Ethan's gut. He reached for the handle. Click. The doors locked. And then, for the first time, the driver spoke. We're not going to a hospital. Ethan's blood ran cold, and in that instant, he knew. They were in another trap. Ethan escaped one trap, only to walk into another. But who is behind the wheel? Is Sienna still playing him? Is Olivia really on his side? Who is in control now? Comment your theories below. Ethan Calloway knew the feeling of walking into a trap. This one was worse. The moment the doors locked, a slow, suffocating silence filled the car. Sienna was bleeding out beside him. Olivia's breathing was uneven, her body tense. And the driver? Completely still. The city lights flickered through the tinted windows, casting eerie shadows over the man's gloved hands gripping the wheel. Ethan's pulse pounded. Where the hell are we going? The driver didn't answer. Ethan's fingers curled into fists. He needed control. He needed a way out. His gaze flicked to Olivia, a silent question. She didn't answer, but her hand subtly moved toward the door handle. The driver spoke, voice smooth. Try to open that door, and I'll put a bullet in your throat. Ethan's muscles coiled. Sienna let out a weak chuckle, her head lolling against the seat. Seems you made more enemies than I did, Calloway. He ignored her. His mind was racing, cataloging every possible move. And then, the driver turned slightly. Ethan finally saw his face, and his entire body went cold. Because it wasn't just anyone, it was Graham Holloway. A name Ethan hadn't heard in years. A name that shouldn't be here. A name that was supposed to be dead. The past slammed into him like a freight train. Graham Holloway. The man Ethan once trusted. The man he had cut out, buried, erased. And now he was here. Ethan exhaled slowly. Should have known you'd crawl back out of the grave. Graham smirked, eyes flickering to the rearview mirror. Funny. That's what I thought about you. Sienna stirred, her breath shaky. Oh, I like this. A reunion. I would have dressed better. Olivia shot her a sharp look. Shut up. Sienna just smiled. Ethan leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on Graham. Whatever this is, it won't work. Graham tilted his head. You sure? Because from where I'm sitting, you're not exactly in a position to negotiate. Ethan's jaw tightened. He needed time, information, an opening. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He moved slowly, deliberately, pulling it out. Blocked signal. Of course. Graham smirked. Come on, Calloway, you think I'd let you make a call? Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he glanced at Olivia. How bad is she? Olivia pressed harder against Sienna's wound, jaw clenched. Bad. She needs a hospital. Sienna let out a soft, breathless laugh. I'm fine. She wasn't. Her skin was too pale. The fabric beneath her was soaked in red. If they didn't stop soon, she wouldn't make it. Ethan turned back to Graham. If you wanted me dead, I'd already be bleeding out in that garage. So tell me, what do you want? Graham's smirk faded slightly. You always were quick. The car took a sharp turn, streetlights flashing past. Ethan could tell they were heading out of the city. Nowhere good. Graham exhaled, rolling his shoulders. See, here's the thing. Sienna made a deal she couldn't keep. Lorenzo played his hand, and now everything's on fire. And you're the loose end. Ethan arched a brow. You're cleaning up for Lorenzo now? Graham chuckled. Lorenzo's cleaning up for me. The words hit hard. Olivia's breath caught beside him. Sienna? She actually smiled. Ethan's stomach twisted. You're lying. Graham's fingers tapped against the wheel. Am I? It all clicked too fast. Lorenzo hadn't been Sienna's partner. He'd been Graham's. Sienna let out a weak, knowing laugh. I told you, Calloway. You were playing the wrong game. Ethan's pulse roared. His vision blurred for a second, rage slamming through his ribs. Sienna wasn't the mastermind. She'd been a pawn. And now? Now she was bleeding out in the back of a car driven by the man who had orchestrated all of it. Ethan inhaled, steadying himself. Then tell me, if Lorenzo was your attack dog, what the hell are you? Graham's eyes met his in the mirror, and he smiled. I'm the one who wins. The car jerked to a stop. Ethan braced himself as the doors unlocked. Outside? An empty warehouse. Dim lighting, the sound of waves crashing against the docks in the distance. Graham turned in his seat, pulling a gun from his jacket. Out. Ethan's grip tightened. He could fight. He could run. But Sienna wouldn't make it. And Olivia? He wasn't sure whose side she was really on. Graham sighed. Come on, Calloway. Let's end this the way it was always supposed to. A slow, creeping dread coiled around Ethan's spine, because for the first time, he wasn't sure if he'd make it out. Ethan just uncovered the real mastermind. But is it too late? Was Sienna ever really in control? Or was she just another pawn in a bigger game? Comment your theories below. Ethan Calloway had no way out. The car doors swung open, revealing the cold, desolate expanse of the warehouse district by the docks. Wind howled through rusted metal beams, carrying the distant sound of waves crashing against stone. No lights, no people, no one to call for help. Ethan glanced at Sienna, barely conscious, her breath shallow. Blood soaked through her silk robe, dark and endless. Olivia's hands pressed against the wound, but they were running out of time. Graham Holloway stepped out first, adjusting his suit like this was nothing more than a business meeting. His gun gleamed under the flickering streetlight. He turned, smiling. Out of the car, Ethan. Ethan didn't move. His mind raced, calculating every possibility. But there were none. He could fight and die. He could run and be hunted. Graham tilted his head. Don't make me drag you. Ethan exhaled slowly, then stepped out. Olivia followed, her jaw tight. She hadn't said a word since Graham revealed himself. She was watching, calculating, waiting. Sienna groaned softly, trying to sit up. Graham chuckled, walking over. Oh, sweetheart, I almost forgot you were still here. Sienna lifted her head, voice hoarse. Screw you. He smirked, crouching beside her. You know, if you weren't such a liability, I might have let you stay in the game a little longer. Sienna spat blood at his shoes. Graham sighed, wiping his cuff. Classy. Ethan's fists curled. She needs a hospital. Graham straightened, turning back to him. That's adorable. You still think you get to make demands. A slow, sinking dread crawled through Ethan's spine. Graham took a step closer. Let's talk about why you're really here. Ethan stayed silent. Graham smirked. See, Ethan, you were never meant to survive this long. When you left me for dead, I realized something. His voice dropped, deadly calm. If you can erase someone like me, then I can erase you too. Ethan's chest tightened. He should have known. This was never about money. Never about power. This was personal. Graham sighed, checking his watch. Here's the deal. I take everything. Your name, your empire, your legacy. You disappear. Ethan's jaw locked. You expect me to just walk away? Graham grinned. No, Calloway. I expect you to be carried out. Then, a gunshot. Not Graham's. Not his. Olivia's. The bullet ripped past Graham's shoulder. Chaos. Ethan lunged. Fists colliding, bodies crashing. The gun hit the pavement, spinning, sliding. Sienna crawled forward, fingers reaching. Graham's fist slammed into Ethan's ribs, pain sharp and instant. Ethan gritted his teeth. Countered. A punch, a crack. Blood splattered. But Graham was fast, too fast. He grabbed the gun, turned. Ethan's heart slammed. The gun was aimed at Olivia. Her breath hitched, eyes locked on Graham's finger, tightening on the trigger. And then, Sienna moved. Fast. Desperate. A second shot. Graham stumbled, then fell. The silence was deafening. Ethan's breath came fast, uneven. He turned to Sienna. She was smiling. Blood smeared across her lips, but her eyes burned with something almost triumphant. Ethan's stomach dropped. Graham was still breathing, but the gun, now in Sienna's hand, She turned it over slowly, testing the weight, amusement flickering in her expression. "Wow," she murmured, breathless. "That felt good." Ethan's pulse pounded. "Sienna, give me the gun." She tilted her head, like she was considering it. Then, she pointed it at Graham. Her smile widened. "What do you think, Calloway?" She let out a weak chuckle. "Should I finish what you started?" Graham coughed, blood spilling past his lips. He tried to sit up, but Sienna pressed a foot against his chest, pinning him down. Ethan's stomach twisted. He had spent the last 24 hours thinking Sienna was the pawn. But now he wasn't sure who had played who. His voice came out low. "Sienna." Her finger hovered over the trigger. She wasn't bluffing. For the first time, Olivia spoke. "Don't." Sienna glanced at her, smirking. "Oh, sweetheart, after everything he's done?" Olivia's jaw clenched. "We're not him." Sienna's smile faltered. Ethan felt the shift. Sienna's grip loosened, just enough. Ethan moved, his hand wrapped around her wrist, forcing the gun down. Sienna let out a sharp gasp, struggling, but she was weak. The gun clattered to the ground. Ethan grabbed it, turned it on her. For the first time, Sienna looked afraid. A sharp inhale, a flicker of something, then gone. She let out a weak laugh. "You won't do it." Ethan's hands shook. Sienna tilted her head. "Go ahead, Calloway," she smiled. "End it." His chest ached, because he could, right now. But if he did, he'd be just like Graham. His jaw tightened, he exhaled, then he tossed the gun away. Sienna blinked, surprised. Ethan turned to Olivia. "Call the feds." Olivia nodded, stepping back. Sienna stared at him for a long moment. Then, she smiled. But this time, it wasn't victorious. It was defeated. As sirens echoed in the distance, Ethan finally let himself breathe. This game, it was finally over. Sienna is caught, Graham is down. But is Ethan truly free? Did Sienna ever really lose? Or did she get exactly what she wanted? Comment your theories below. Ethan Calloway should have felt relief. Graham was on the ground, barely breathing. Sienna was slumped against the wall, her silk robe soaked in blood. Sirens wailed in the distance, flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the steel beams of the abandoned warehouse. This should have been the end. It wasn't. Ethan's hands still shook. Not from fear, from restraint, because Sienna had looked him in the eye and dared him to pull the trigger. And he hadn't. Now she was smirking through the pain, her lips curling upward as if she had won something no one else understood. Ethan exhaled, stepping back. Olivia stood beside him, phone still clutched in her grip. She had called the feds. The moment they arrived, this would all be over. But something felt wrong. Sienna wasn't panicking. She wasn't even angry. She just waited. A slow prickle of unease crawled down Ethan's spine. No, this wasn't over. Not yet. Graham coughed, blood spilling from his lips. His voice was hoarse. "You think the feds are going to save you, Calloway?" Ethan ignored him. His focus was on Sienna. "What did you do?" His voice was low, controlled, but she heard the edge. She sighed dramatically, tilting her head against the wall. "I don't know what you mean." Ethan's fists clenched. "You're too smart to go down without a contingency plan." Sienna smiled, slow and lazy. She had planned for this. Ethan's pulse pounded. "Tell me what you did." Her gaze flicked to Olivia. "Do you want to tell him, sweetheart? Or should I?" Olivia's breath hitched beside him. Ethan turned sharply. Olivia's hands were trembling. "No." Ethan's chest tightened. "What is she talking about?" Sienna chuckled. "Oh, Ethan, you really thought Olivia was just here to save you?" Ethan's stomach twisted. "Olivia." Olivia didn't look at him. Sienna continued, voice dripping with amusement. "Poor thing, she didn't know how deep she was in until it was too late." Ethan's mind raced, his pulse roaring. What the hell is she talking about? Finally, Olivia met his gaze. And in that instant, he knew. His blood ran cold. Sienna smirked. She signed the papers. Ethan's breath stalled. "What papers?" Sienna exhaled dramatically. "The ones that made her your legal proxy." The words slammed into him like a wrecking ball. His pulse pounded in his skull. No, that wasn't possible. But Olivia's expression confirmed it. She had signed something, and she hadn't known what. Ethan inhaled, his voice dangerously quiet. "What did you make her sign?" Sienna let out a weak chuckle. "Just some last-minute adjustments to your empire, Calloway." His stomach dropped. He turned back to Olivia. "Tell me that's not true." Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know." Sienna beamed. "She really didn't. That's the best part." Ethan's vision blurred with rage, because now, Olivia was the one holding everything. Not Sienna. Not him. Olivia. A slow, suffocating silence settled between them. Graham laughed, a weak, ragged sound. I have to hand it to you, Sienna. You really did play the long game. Sienna grinned despite the blood staining her teeth. Ethan felt sick. His empire, his legacy, transferred, and Olivia, the only person he had left to trust, was the one holding it. Graham smirked, tilting his head toward her. Well, sweetheart, what's it going to be? Ethan's pulse roared. He knew what Graham was doing. He was trying to plant doubt, trying to turn them against each other, trying to finish what Sienna started. Ethan took a slow step toward Olivia. Tell me you're not still playing me. She swallowed, shaking her head. I never meant for this to happen. That wasn't an answer. Sienna watched with amusement. Ethan inhaled sharply, fists clenching. He was out of moves. Again. And Olivia knew it. A flicker of emotion crossed her face. Regret. Then resolve. She stepped closer. I can fix this. Ethan scoffed. Fix it? You have to trust me. Ethan let out a hollow laugh. Trust? After everything? But what choice did he have? Sirens grew louder. The flashing lights painted Olivia's face in sharp reds and blues. Sienna grinned. This is my favorite part. Ethan exhaled slowly, and he made his decision. He turned to Olivia and held out his hand. A silent agreement, a new gamble, one last chance, because whether he liked it or not, his fate was in Olivia's hands now. Ethan lost everything, but Olivia holds the key to his future. Can he trust her? Was Olivia playing him all along, or was she just another pawn in Sienna's game? Comment your theories below. Ethan Calloway never thought he'd be here. Not after everything. Not after losing everything. Yet here he was, standing in front of Olivia Carter, the woman who now held his empire in the palm of her hand, the woman who had unknowingly signed away his legacy, the woman he had no choice but to trust. A cold breeze swept through the balcony of Olivia's penthouse, the New York skyline stretching behind her like a silent witness to everything that had unraveled. The city never stopped moving. Neither did power. And right now, power belonged to her. She crossed her arms, studying him. You haven't said a word since we got here. Ethan exhaled slowly. I'm still deciding what to say. A flicker of something crossed her face. Hesitation, guilt, maybe something else. You think I planned this, she murmured. He tilted his head. Didn't you? Olivia let out a breath, shaking her head. Sienna used me, Ethan. She made me sign those papers knowing I wouldn't read them carefully. By the time I realized what she did, it was too late. His jaw tightened. Too late for what? She met his gaze. For you to believe me. Silence. The weight of it pressed between them. Ethan wasn't a fool. He had played in the trenches of power long enough to know that control was never given. It was taken. And Olivia? She had taken it. Even if she hadn't meant to. Even if she hadn't planned it, she had it now. Ethan took a step closer, watching the way she stiffened slightly. He didn't miss it. The flicker of tension in her shoulders, the guarded edge to her stance. She wasn't sure what he was going to do. Good. It meant she still feared him. Or maybe she feared what they could become. His voice came out steady, even. So what happens now? Olivia swallowed, glancing at the skyline. The city buzzed beneath them, oblivious to the war still raging in the space between them. Then, slowly, she turned back to him. I'm not handing it back, she said. Ethan's fists clenched. Olivia? Not yet. That stopped him. His eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Olivia took a slow step forward, closing the distance between them. You built something powerful, Ethan, and you let people tear it apart. You let Sienna in. You let Graham haunt you. You let your past dictate your future. His breath slowed. She wasn't just talking about the business. She was talking about him, his choices, his failures. Ethan Calloway, the man who had always been 10 steps ahead, had finally lost. And yet Olivia was still standing in front of him, challenging him, testing him. He didn't know whether to be angry or impressed. So that's it? He murmured. You take everything and make me beg for it back? Olivia let out a soft laugh. You don't beg, Ethan. We both know that. He held her gaze, the air between them charged, humming with something sharp and unspoken. She was giving him a chance. Not an easy one. Not a clean one, a trial, a test, a gamble. And Ethan Calloway had never backed down from a gamble. His lips curled slightly. What's your offer? Olivia studied him as if weighing every possibility, every risk. Then, finally, you work for me. Ethan arched a brow. Excuse me? You work for me, she repeated. You want your empire back? Earn it. Prove you deserve it. A slow, stunned silence stretched between them. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. You realize what you're doing, don't you? She smirked. Making you my employee? No. He stepped closer, voice low. You're challenging me. Her breath hitched slightly, but she didn't step back. He liked that. Maybe a little too much. Olivia tilted her head, eyes sharp. Are you scared you'll lose? Ethan smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. She had no idea who she was dealing with. He reached out, trailing his fingers lightly along the edge of the balcony railing beside her. Then, he leaned in, just enough for her to hear his next words. You should be scared I'll win. The air crackled. Something shifted between them. Not trust, not yet, but something dangerous, something electric. Olivia held his gaze for a long moment, then slowly, she held out her hand. A deal, a challenge, a new beginning. Ethan looked at it, and then, game on. Ethan and Olivia are no longer enemies, but they aren't lovers. Not yet. They are rivals, they are equals, and they are playing the most dangerous game of all, trust. Will Ethan earn back his empire? Will Olivia fall for the man she's trying to control? Or will one of them destroy the other first? Comment your thoughts below. Like and subscribe if you'd read a sequel.